Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Now, can you hear me, Jennifer?
I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
You can't see me.
No.
Now, can you see me, Jennifer?
No, I cannot. All I see is this little head person in the middle of a screen.
Something might have locked up. Then we're just gonna go forward. I had to reset the audio driver again.
Okay.
And I think I am done with Blue Yeti tonight. I already have the alternate hardware laying on the side here, and Thursday we're going to be on a different microphone. Let me start all over again. Good evening, Malcontents. I am the Malcontent. We're starting a few minutes early tonight, and we're having some technical difficulties, and it is what it is. We're just going to roll with it. It's going to make it a little challenging for Jennifer because we actually have a number of video clips that she has tonight, and poor Jennifer isn't going to be able to see when they're playing, so I'm going to have to cue you, Jennifer, when it's going down. Today is March 15th, 2021, Monday. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We're starting a few minutes late. We've had a rough start, but it's going to get better from here, Jennifer, I promise. And with that, why don't we go ahead into the land acknowledgement, and I'll just cue you up.
Thank you.
Take it away, Jennifer.
Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We're grateful to live and work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working toward repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. It's greatly appreciated. Pam, congratulations on getting banned from Safe Seattle. That's a great place to get banned from. So we salute you here at Malcontent News for getting banned. Yes, we could read the comments a lot better. We're working and learning. We're working and learning. What I want to do before we get started here, this is the time to remind you, please spam those hearts. Go ahead and blow up those hearts and mess with the algorithms on Twitter, Periscope, and Facebook. By the way, if you are watching us on Twitter or Periscope, Periscope goes away at the end of this month. So you should start migrating either over to YouTube or over to malcontentnews.tv. And we probably need to start pushing that a lot harder in the shows going forward. YouTube, you can go ahead and give us a like or a subscribe, I should say, over at YouTube there. And is this our Twitch? I can't see the buttons. That is the Twitch. Jennifer, I'm getting so much better at this. There we go. The Twitch button is the R button. See, it's counterintuitive. But there's our Twitch button. And the other thing you can do when you spam those hearts, you let our mods, admins, editors, reporters know that you love everything that they do for us. Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and, I'm not going to run the warning yet because that's further into the show where we're going to have that stuff. We'll go ahead. Do have a disclaimer warning. We are going to be showing some protest video tonight. And Jennifer, I think with that, we're just going to go ahead and jump into the first story because it is a breaking news story out of Clark County, Washington.
Okay.
I'm very aware that Twitch starts with a T, but also Twitter starts with a Z, and Twitter comes after Twitch, so Twitter got the T, and so Twitch got the R on the buttons. All right, our next story our first story tonight is breaking news. It's part of actually why we're a little bit behind, because I was tracking down heard there was a video, and we tracked down the video for this. Judge Darvin Zimmerman, which is out of the Superior Court in Clark County, 70-year-old judge, believe he's been on the bench down there for 30 years, had a hot mic moment. Judge Zimmerman is probably finding that hot mic moment unfortunate, while just about everybody else is really glad to find out what's going on inside of Judge Zimmerman's heart. And with that, I'm going to roll the clip. Jennifer, I know you're at a disadvantage, so I'll explain a little bit to you at the end so you can comment on it.
Okay, thank you.
The black guy, they were trying to make an angel out of the one that was said, I'm going to feed bullets to the cops when I show up if there's cops there.
Which was this a local?
He's the Hazeldale one.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he's the one that said I'm a racist because I hate white people. So I guess he hates his girlfriend too.
Was he the one that was shot by the police in Hazeldale?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Okay. Well, the cops were already back on the road. My son was there. Luckily, he got the promotion to sergeant because he could have been a shooter.
Oh my God.
And then they'd be marching out of his house with signs saying you're a murderer, all that bullshit. It's crazy. It is just crazy. Like his dad, I know so many people.
Yeah, you know everybody.
I know more people than the sheriff knows about this investigation. So I sent him the information, I find out about it. I ran into that chaplain who said he did the, whatever you call it, the thing after the fact, consulting everybody, and trying to know whatever about the deal. And he's told me that KP's dad says, well, yeah, if he had a gun, I guess it was justified. And then the next day he wakes up with dollar signs in his eyes, and George Floyd attorneys had already contacted him. He does a GoFundMe page. He said, my unarmed son was murdered by the police. He knew his son had a gun. That makes me no one's going to do anything about that. That's not getting money for false pretenses. So he got $70,000 as opposed to George Floyd. Better story. And George Floyd was terrible. I get that. George Floyd family got $20 million. But I think he had a death wish, nothing or something. He calls his girlfriend to say goodbye.
Oh, wow.
And then she won't release her phone, so you really don't know what texts he was saying. But he was so dumb. So another version was he thought he was going to go to prison for life, for one deal, maybe a year, I don't know about that. Probably get diversion, probably get drug court. But anyway, he was calling goodbye, and then supposedly, then she comes out with this false narrative that, well, they shot him, 30 times in the back. He get shot once in the back, but unfortunately got shot.
Oh,
But you
God.
think they say if it's such a big racial deal, maybe you shouldn't give one of the officers. He thought he was going to get killed himself, shot him. He was black, so it wouldn't have mattered if the guy was green. is the point, but it's just this narrative that there's like wholesale killing with minorities or something.
Gosh, yeah, every case.
Even that article, and I saw that lady, and I sent it to other people. I said it to my son, the lady from the NAACP, and I was almost a lifetime member. My first job out of college was working in all the black community center. And that was funny. I said I was their token white guy. I was racist.
That's good. It's good to feel what that feels like, I think.
Yeah. But anyway, I wasn't discriminated. I felt bad about it all. And I coached and counseled, did all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But this lady, she talks about the blacks being murdered here in Clark County, allegedly armed, allegedly. Like, throw that stuff out there. You don't know the facts. It's not allegedly. He had a freaking gun and they got it on video. And you put this, distrust out there in the community. It's still the same thing. And they want to argue that because there's whatever, I think, exactly, yes, there's 4% blacks in Clark County, but there's 12% blacks in the jail. So does that mean we're automatically racist? Does it?
Not necessarily. I mean,
it doesn't, because I did one the other day where 3 black guys shot and robbed this guy. They're going to take an inordinate amount of time in the Clark County jail.
Yeah.
They won't go to trial for a year or so. They're going to be off to prison for, I assume, 6 or 7 years for robbery and shooting somebody. They pistol whip them too. And they're nice kids, put it that way. And he was a Spanish guy, so is that racist? I don't know.
The bottom line is every case is different. We have to look at the facts of every single case. But there's so much anger out there now. I just feel like we're falling off a cliff.
Jennifer, we got your camera fixed while we were running that clip.
Yes.
So Jennifer got to see part of what was going on. So let me give everybody an update on where we're at, because this story literally broke around 5 o'clock this afternoon. So here's what's happened since the story broke. One, the Clark County Prosecutor's Office is filing a motion to have Darvin Zimmerman removed from the Peterson Jr. case. The Clark County Court has condemned Judge Zimmerman, and several high-profile law firms, mostly minority or black-owned law firms, are calling for the immediate resignation of Judge Zimmerman. Jennifer, what we witnessed in this hot mic moment, and for people that don't know, and I know this because we've watched court cases in the age of COVID, and court cases are done during Zoom meetings. And in between or before a court session may start, they start the Zoom meeting early, and there's kind of the minutia of the court thing is going on in the background. So this was not like some secret recording Zoom meeting thing. This was something that he just stepped on his own big friggin' landmine and basically exposes the racism inherent in the system in the United States.
I didn't get to. I was like trying to read the tiny font on my screen, but I don't have my glasses on, so it was like exceedingly difficult. That's great when you can expose one of these people for the systemic racism, for being a part of the larger issue of systemic racism in the courts. But it's a massive issue, and make an example out of one person and asking for their resignation and doing these things is great. But you still have so much more to dismantle. And I think it's, exceedingly important that we start to root out all of this rather than just focusing on this one individual.
You could just drop the mic on that, because that's it. I mean, that's why I open with this just exposes the racism inherent in the system. The term, the words that he used, the blacks. I mean, it's like, dude. And human beings are not infallible. I get that. And you cannot convince me that there is even the most idealistic judge. There's that judge that does traffic court in Rhode Island that everybody loves this guy, right? He's kind of almost has like this stand-up comedian act that he does with him and I think it's like it's the equivalent of like an assistant prosecutor, but it's traffic court and minor infractions. And he genuinely seems to have a good heart. And he genuinely seems to be like, look, if you screwed up, I'm not going to prosecute stupidity. And I'm using his as an example. But you can't tell me that somewhere inside of him, he has some inherent bias. But this goes way past inherent bias. Yeah. This is just racism on the bench. And let's not forget, we're talking Washington State. And I know Clark County is kind of Chud Central, but we're talking right outside the edge of Portland in Western Washington here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it just makes you wonder how many times his inherent biases have played into the ways in which he's sentenced a BIPOC person. And how rampant, we're talking about Clark County, Washington. I mean, I lived there for a while when I worked at Portland Meadows in Clark County. It's there's parts of it that think like Seattle, that it's pretty woke, and then there are parts of it that are really, really redneck. So you have to wonder just how extreme it is. Within the court system down there, and what you're essentially dealing with, because just on the other side of the river is Portland, which also imagines itself as super woke and has been doing tons of protesting and all of these things to try and elicit some kind of change. But you have to wonder how far this racism extends across the bridge into Portland as well.
Yeah, one of the comments on is from our community. It just scrolled by. It was something on the lines of like literally proof of systemic racism, and that's exactly what this is. And it goes back to your earlier comment, Jennifer. On great, we can remove Judge Zimmerman, but Judge Zimmerman is not a unique individual in this school of thought. And then there's the devil that we know and the devil we don't know. There is the potential that Judge Zimmerman's replacement could be worse. I'm going to close on this so we can keep moving because we can really rat hole in this story. And we will continue to follow what happens, and we will update on our website and also on our social media channels as stories in this evolves, or we'll do an update on Thursday if it drags out. I don't even know where I was going with this at this point. So I'm just, it's super, super frustrating. And we will just continue to follow that story. So, and with that, we're going to go to our next segment.
Okay.
Yes, it's that time again for Malcontented Minutes. And this is also another time here that I want to say spam those hearts. Let those mods and admins know that you love us. And also let the Facebook algorithm know that you love us. If you're not feeling very heart, you can just go ahead and give us a like if you want. If you're watching us on Twitter or Periscope, you can do hearts. If you're watching us on YouTube or on Twitch, you just do like a line of hearts. Or I love you, mods. Or I love you, Jen, not in a weird, creepy way. Or I love you, Mal, and not in a weird, creepy way. We would really appreciate that. So, what is Malcontented Minutes? We have 20 minutes. By the way, Jennifer and I nailed 20 minutes the last show. We nailed it almost to the second. 10 stories, 2 minutes each, 20 minutes. Mods are going to go and put a link up to the poll. I see that we have one link up to the poll with a Facebook ID tracking tag attached to it. And I think that the Twitch folks saw that. I don't know if everybody else is. I love you, Mal, in the creepiest of ways is a comment, Jennifer. Jennifer, we're going to have you start off. Okay.
Sorry,
all right, are we ready to rock and roll? Oh, wait a minute. The poll. You get to control the news. There's a poll, and I started talking about the poll. And yes, there's the link, and the other mods and admins will share it on the other channels. You can go to the poll, malcontentment.com whack poll, and you can vote for the story that you want Jennifer and I to talk about more at the end of the evening. Full stop. I wouldn't go and vote right now. I would wait until you hear all 10 stories. All right, Jennifer, are we ready?
Yes, we are ready.
All right, here we go. Clock is running.
Okay, so today, anti-government activist and entitled white man Ammon Bundy was arrested today after he refused to wear a mask in court and missed his own trial. I'm sure a lot of you remember Ammon Bundy. He's Cliven Bundy's son. They are rather anti-government, occupied federal land in resistance to, escalating or the inability to graze cattle, something along those lines. Some entitled Western white man BS. So Bundy, who is now 41, should be familiar with mask mandate, as the Idaho Supreme Court implemented this mandate over a year ago. And after his refusal to put on a mask, Bundy was not granted admission inside the Ada County Courthouse, prompting Magistrate Judge David Manweil to issue a warrant for Bundy's arrest. So as of 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time, Bundy was still being held in lieu of $10,000 bail. If Bundy does make bail, conditions could include that he follow courthouse rules, including following the mask mandate.
So I actually have a video clip, so I'm going to play the video clip, and that's how I'm going to use some of my 60 seconds.
Ammon Bundy in the news once again after being arrested for failure to appear in court to face a trespassing and resisting arrest charge. He and a group gathered outside the courthouse this morning. At least one person was sent to the hospital after some sort of altercation with law enforcement, and Bundy was booked back into the Ada County Jail. Ada County Sheriff's Office says he defied an Idaho Supreme Court order by refusing to wear masks in the Ada County Courthouse. Charges stem from an incident during the special session in the Idaho legislature back in August. You'll recall he was wheeled out of the Capitol after refusing to leave the State House.
Oh my goodness, Jennifer. So all I'm going to say is this. I would have a lot to talk about if this is the story we unpack. It is really, really hard under U.S. law, apparently, to charge somebody with domestic terrorism or even implicit domestic terrorism. And Ammon Bundy is a walking example of how difficult that is to do. And that's what I'll say to unpack that out. And we're going to go ahead and move on to story number 2. Story number 2. Oh, Tucker Carlson. Tucker. You have pissed off basically the entire U.S. military.
So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are going to fight our wars. It's a mockery of the U.S. military.
Carlson terminating his tirade with an anti-trans dig.
While China's military becomes more masculine as it's assembled the world's largest navy, our military needs to become, as Joe Biden says, more feminine, whatever feminine means anymore, since men and women no longer exist.
The moment met with outrage across the military.
Drama TV.
Including from Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby.
What we absolutely won't do is take personnel advice from a talk show host or the Chinese military.
Military women tweeting photos of themselves pregnant in uniform.
So, Jennifer, it actually gets worse because guess who joined this party? Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz today very upset. He wants an investigation into military and Pentagon officials that have spoken out against Tucker Carlson and his transphobic and sexist rant against our women and trans military members. You got 50 seconds.
Tucker Carlson is a malignant dolt. He's a woman hater. He is sexist. He is transphobic. He is absolutely disgusting. He probably, I hate to say this, but he probably never gets laid. And if he does, I feel sorry for whoever he's doing it with. But also, I think it's absolutely disgusting. It just goes back to this really ingrained sexist belief that women are good enough to produce children for the military, but not good enough to participate in it.
Ooh, mic drop. Boom! You are feisty tonight, Jennifer. You ready for story number 4?
Let's do it.
All right, clock is running.
All right, so Representative Deb Haaland of the Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico is now confirmed as the first Native American Secretary of the Interior, in spite of Republican objections that Haaland an actual living, breathing Native American, is, quote, too radical to oversee a department that houses the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The vote was 51-40, and this is a monumental and long overdue moment in history. After the confirmation, member of the Pueblo Nation's Define Poston declared, quote, Indian country has shouted from the valleys, from the mountaintops, that it's time. It's overdue, end quote. In addition to being an Indigenous woman, Holland is also a single mother and received public assistance prior to completing her law degree. Holland has referred to climate change as the challenge of our lifetime, which prompted Republicans like Steve Daines of Montana and others entangled with the fossil fuel industry to rail against her nomination, using the old quote, it'll take away our jobs, end quote, should Holland do away with things like fracking and further construction of oil pipelines. Claims about mass job loss, as Daines and others have claimed, have already been debunked on several occasions. So congratulations to the new Secretary of the Interior and member of the Pueblo Nation, Deb Haaland.
I love this so much. I love this story so much. Now, here is the icky part about this story as I unpack it out, which is she was confirmed 50-41. That means 9 Republican senators punted on the vote once she got the 50 because they weren't brave enough to put their no vote on paper and instead just did the abstain. Once they got to the 50 and a 50-50 tie, if that was the case, they would have brought over Vice President Kamala Harris, and she would have done the tie-breaking vote on this. So I am thrilled. It's taken 171 years, but my goodness, a person who is Native American is in charge of the native homeland soil. I love it.
Yes.
All right. The real, I said story number 4 because normally Jennifer is, but anyway, this is the story number 4. We're going to go ahead and start with that. And story number 4 takes us to a horrible story out of the state of Louisiana. We have a video clip for this.
Louisiana State Police have filed criminal charges against 4 of their own. Troopers Dakota DeMoss, George Harper, Randall Dickerson, and Jacob Brown each face charges of simple battery and malfeasance in office.
What hasn't been disclosed is that Trooper Brown's father was the chief of staff under the prior administration.
According to state police, that's when Troopers DeMoss, Harper, and Brown deactivated their body cameras and used excessive and unjustifiable force. Brown again falsified the use of force report and arrest report and failed to indicate and provide video evidence.
You know, and every time I got ready to speak, he would hit me with the flashlight.
This story actually extends, Jennifer, to 6 state troopers. 1 state trooper under investigation has killed himself, and 2 state troopers have been involved in multiple incidents. You get 45 seconds. Another example of systemic racism.
You essentially took the words right out of my mouth. Systemic racism. The system was built to keep white men of a particular status in positions of power and basically devalue and disenfranchise anybody who did not fit within, you know, the phenotypical characteristics of whiteness or who could not claim that status. And we see this repeatedly over and over again, history repeating itself. You know, we talk about Republicans especially want to claim that they're the party of Lincoln and that they abolished slavery. Slavery was never fucking abolished. Excuse my language. You had the Black Codes, you had, you know, convict leasing programs, you had Jim Crow, you have, you know, people in conditions of poverty and oppressed and, you know, excessive use of force, not only by the police, but, you know, in the judicial system. So you have all of these things, and this is just another example of this that continues to repeat itself throughout history because the system needs to be dismantled.
Boom. Again. Jennifer, are you ready for story 5?
Let's do it. All right. So the Kaiser Family Foundation released an analysis last week that reveals those who identify as LGBTQIA have endured worse hardships during the pandemic ranging from unemployment to worsening mental health. As a result, people identifying as LGBTQIA+ were more likely to view getting vaccinated for COVID as a community responsibility. Although data is limited in comparison to other groups, 56% reported either losing their jobs or knowing someone who had, while 49% experienced a significant decline in positive mental health. Both LGBTQIA and non-LGBTQIA identifying people felt similarly about getting the vaccine, but 75% of LGBTQIA identifying people saw it as a social responsibility. The study suggests that part of the reason may be related to socioeconomic status, age, and most identify as Democrat or another political affiliation, aka not conservative.
Hallelujah! Holy shit!
Oh my goodness gracious. COVID has disproportionately impacted every minority structure and population in this country. And it has done that in part because they cannot build as much generational wealth. And there is this myth, even to say we come with Asians, right? Well, Asians are more wealthy than Americans. And when people say Asians, they are lumping all of these people right into one big group. But when you talk about, say, the Hmong people or Cambodians or Bangladesh, they are not, right? It is the stereotyping of, say, people of South Korean or Japanese descent, and to some extent Chinese descent. Chinese is kind of across the spectrum. And I know I'm off the LGBTQIA angle. This was very heartbreaking for me to hear that there was such a disproportionate impact to this community also.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, story number 6. And story number 6 is also not good news in the LGBTIA community. Sorry, Malcontent. The Vatican declared Monday that the Catholic Church won't bless same-sex unions since God cannot bless sin. The declaration distinguished between the Church's welcoming and blessing of gay people, which it upheld, but not their unions. It argued that such unions are not part of God's plan and that any sacramental recognition of them could be confused with marriage. Jesus Christ. The note immediately pleased conservatives, disheartened advocates for LGBT Catholics, and threw a wrench in the debate with the German church, which has been at the forefront of opening discussion on hot-button issues, such as the church's teaching on homosexuality. The Vatican holds that gay people must be treated with dignity and respect, but that gay sex is intrinsically disordered, quote unquote. Catholic teaching says that marriage is a lifelong union between a man and woman and part of God's plan and is intended for the sake of creating new life. Since gay unions aren't intended to be part of that plan, they cannot be blessed by the church.
Oh.
Gross. Jennifer, you got 45 seconds.
Why the papacy still has so much power, I don't know. Let's ask the current pope about Pope Julius, who commanded the papal army during the Renaissance period, and how many boyfriends Pope Julius had. Let's talk about when the Catholic Church basically forbid, their priests to look at women, and multiple during the High Middle Ages took on male lovers. Let's talk about that, Catholic Church. Let's talk about your issue with little boys and priests. Let's talk about that, Catholic Church. And once we address all of these issues, then maybe we'll consider your opinion on gay marriage.
The one thing in this story, Jennifer, I'm going to go a couple of seconds over this one that made me kind of giggle when I read it. There was one thing is, and I always say when I talk about history, I know with you, I feel like I really have to stay in my lane. I was really amused that the Germans are once again the rabble-rousers within the Catholic Church, right? The Declaration of Martin Luther in the 1500s, which created the Lutheran Church, and the Germans within the Catholic community are creating chaos for the Catholic Church again, and I'm very amused by that.
Yes.
All right, Jennifer, you got story number 7.
Oh, for you entertainment buffs out there, J-Lo and A-Rod are on the rocks. And I don't know if you remember, about a month ago, I talked to this on Malcontent Minutes about how A-Rod had been caught texting a very young, very single, very blonde reality TV star. So A-Rod There are rumors the two have ended their 3-year engagement. However, both J-Lo and A-Rod are doing major damage control right now, seeking to quash any rumblings that their union is coming to an end. It has been reported by several outlets that A-Rod has a long history of inappropriately texting other women while in relationships. Go figure. Although there's no evidence he's acted beyond texting, people close to the couple suggest that J-Lo has reached her limit with his bullshit, but the couple have personal and business entanglements that will take some time to undo. So I guess A-Rod is about to find out if J-Lo's love really won't cost a thing, but I'm guessing he's going to find out that it will.
I have opinions on this, believe it or not. A lot of it's really inappropriate. So I'm going to keep the appropriate thoughts out loud. And my appropriate thoughts on this is, as a Red Sox fan, as somebody that moved to, and as a big baseball fan, as somebody that moved here to Seattle when A-Rod left Seattle after the 2001 season and broke everybody's heart here, as the guy who basically single-handedly bankrupted the Texas Rangers, and that was on George W. Bush's watch, by the way, and then went to the Yankees and was just a douche nozzle in New York, and that's probably being insulting to douche nozzles. He probably was worse than that. He had a terrible reputation in New York. As a womanizer, as just an a-hole, as a guy who doesn't like pay his bills. He was constantly in trouble with management. And, you know, a lot of, I say this very carefully. This is the part where I'm like, I want to be careful. A lot of people in acting and actresses have a lot of problems with personal relationships. There are very few people in those vocations that they marry somebody and they're married for the rest of their life. And you hear that they're like, I cannot remember Henry Fonda's wife. Oh my God, I could see. She was African Queen.
I can't remember.
Somebody in the comments. I'm totally rat holing on this.
No.
She was the actress in the African Queen, Henry Fonda's wife. Right? They had this beautiful lifelong life, but those are the exceptions. So at the end of the day, I'm not shocked that this relationship is a train wreck. I guess is what it comes down to.
Yep. Me either.
Did we had to throw somebody out in the comments over the A-Rod story?
Wow.
Someone got fired up over A-Rod.
Maybe it was my portrayal of him as a womanizer.
Oh, maybe. All right, here we go.
Maybe.
We're going to story number 8. We will start the timer. Story number 8 is just a feel-good story. I'm just going to hit the button.
So big news at the Houston Zoo. Once again, happy to announce another successful elephant birth. Yesterday morning, 11:30 in the morning, Tupelo gave birth to a 285-pound little girl, or not so little girl, Tupelo's first baby. So we were terribly excited that everything went well. She went into labor around 12:30 a.m. in the morning. 11 hours later, baby hit the ground, doing great. Mom's doing great. Baby's nursing. Everyone looks great. We couldn't be happier. Just waiting for them to have a few more milestones. And then we're going to put them on exhibit and introduce them to everybody else.
Jennifer, I know you have mixed feelings on zoos, but oh my God, that elephant was just so cute. And also for me, just such a sharp contrast in the change in weather in less than a month in Seattle. That was another thing that jumped out of that story. You get a full minute.
I actually love elephants, and I think, they're going through so much destruction because of like the palm harvest, that there's sanctuaries for baby elephants, because elephants, if they are not in the company of other elephants, can actually die of loneliness. So Yashar Ali, he's a journalist. He does like all this promotion stuff with baby elephants, and there's sanctuaries. There's people that actually go and sleep with these baby elephants, cover them with blankets. They keep them company until they can be released with, other elephants, because it's very traumatic for them. A lot of times their mothers are killed and they're orphaned. They found some being, shot at and other things. And so I think it's always a wonderful thing to see elephants anywhere, just because they're having such a rough time alongside gorillas because of the palm oil industry. So yeah.
All right, Jennifer, we're going to go ahead and move on to story number 9.
Yes. And that is me. So I know we have some clip for this, so I'm just going to briefly preface it. This is a formerly unhomed man in San Diego, Mark Gervais. He and his friend David Hendon, were actually recognized by the community for going along while they were unhomed and actually cleaning up garbage off of the beaches. And so they received $30,000 in community donations. But what happens next is a super feel-good story, and I'm just going to let you roll the video.
So big news at the Houston Zoo once again.
Out in my county blues, Daytona Beach.
Jennifer, I have bad news.
You don't have it.
We don't have it.
That's all right. I can talk about it. So again, Mark Gervais, 63 of San Diego, is the proud owner of a new smile after a local dentist donated $8,000 in dental work to the formerly unhomed man, who alongside his friend Dave Hendon regularly picked up garbage left behind on local beaches. After being recognized for their community cleanup efforts, the community donated nearly $30,000 to the two men, but it didn't stop there. Through a program called Elevated Smiles, San Diego dentist Dr. Tina Saw found out about Mark and wanted to do something beneficial for him and his smile. Plagued by teeth problems and unable to afford dental care, Mark had regular dental pain and was down to 3 teeth. Dr. Saw pulled those 3 teeth and gave him a brand new smile. Mark is now on his way to fulfilling his dream of enjoying a nice, juicy steak with his brand new teeth.
This was just an amazing story. I'm incredibly bummed that the clip will not load up because it gave me the serious feels.
Yes.
Like I was like, oh, after I watched this video clip. Another thing that happened for him, Jennifer, is a local dealer in San Diego completely restored his minivan that he is living in, detailed it, mechanical, everything, so that he would have a reliable place, a reliable vehicle to get around, and a comfortable place. They did like some upgrades and stuff for him to stay in. It is just an amazing story. He is a well-liked individual in the community.
David,
we know firsthand there's people in the unhomed community that do great stuff like this.
Never mind. I'm good.
What happened?
Nothing. Somebody was calling, but it stopped, so I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry.
And with that, we're going to go to story number 10. And I've already kind of tipped our hands on what story number 10 is.
Out in my county blues, Daytona Beach didn't want nothing to do with you.
Robert Burke, aka Naked Cowboy, has already made a song about his latest trip to Daytona Beach that ended like this.
Get on the sidewalk.
Patty.
You need to be quiet. Move. Get your over here. Do not resist.
You are fighting me.
The strings of his famous guitar sticking out every which way after Daytona Beach officers arrested him for panhandling and also charged him for resisting arrest without violence.
People try to give me money, but I'm not asking.
No, we've seen them giving you money.
I know they do.
You can't.
All right, so a couple of things here. Number one, police broke his guitar. They slapped that resisting arrest charge on him, Jennifer, and the camera doesn't play that out, right? I'll defend the devil when the devil is deserving of getting that. Now, full stop. Let's draw the line here. Part of what was not covered in that Orlando story is that he dropped homophobic and racial slurs at the police officers that were arresting him, and he was just a general all-around dirtbag through the whole process. And lots of people who have dealt with him in New York City as tourists, including the comments which are blowing up on people who have dealt with him in New York, say he's a dirtbag. You get like 30 seconds.
So I wonder, for one thing, he's got a little bit of a privilege because he's a man doing this in public. Could you imagine if that was a woman out there doing that? Even take away the terrible attributes that he has with the hurling, the homophobic and racial slurs. Could you imagine a naked woman out there with a guitar, how quickly that would get quashed? Or a naked BIPOC person of color out there trying to do the same damn shit?
How about a naked trans person?
Get that far. Yeah. Huh?
A naked trans person.
Yeah. Exactly. Whatever. Yeah. That's all I got.
He is planning to sue, by the way, Daytona Beach over his treatment.
Oh, wah. Cry me a fucking river. Excuse my language.
So with I get to hit the button.
Nope, sorry. It's been a week.
I think we went the whole week last week without hitting the button. I love that button.
I've had
All
a
right,
button.
this is your chance to vote, Malcontents. Mods admins, go ahead and drop the link to the poll over into the comments section. You get to pick the story that you want Jennifer and I to unpack, and we will let you know when votes are closing out. That will be right before the Women History section of the show, or say Women's Month. Well, Women's History, Women's Month. It's Women History. Never mind. We're going to go ahead and do a little brief pause for the cause. I'm going to catch my breath, and we're going to keep rolling. Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. And yes, thank you very much for supporting us. Those hearts are for you, Malcontent, and all of the patrons that make all of the work that we do possible and allow us to continue to do what we do here and provide you great content like in our next story. Hey, Jennifer, before we do the Breonna Taylor story, one of the mods or admins just put a thing up. We're at 998 TikTok followers. Now, for a lot of you that might be watching this going, why is that a big deal? I don't understand. We only set up our TikTok like 2 weeks ago, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing on it. And we had a TikTok that we did on Friday, Jennifer, and it's almost up to 400,000 views. Which actually is the definition of viral over at TikTok. Over 250,000, you're like minor league viral. 1 million, you're like super mega viral. So we've gone viral on TikTok. So who's going to be number 999 and number 1,000? I guess that's really what it comes down to. And yes. I will pop that up one more time. You can follow us at Malcontent News over at TikTok. So story number 4 takes us to Seattle and the Breonna Taylor vigil, march, protest, and field editor Renee was out. We love you, Renee. Was out and about with her camera, and she shot some video of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that's the best way to put it. We're going to go ahead and roll that clip.
Move on the sidewalk.
13 people arrested on Saturday in Seattle, Jennifer. Reports of property damage, but also I saw a ton of reports, and including reports from people that say aren't our deep followers, just kind of in the general, that Seattle police were particularly feeling kind of stabby on Saturday.
Kind of stabby? Yeah, that's a good word for SPD. I've talked about this before. I live in university housing. I live on the periphery of the Laurelhurst neighborhood. So the next door, I don't know if you know what next door is, the conversations they have.
Next door is a freak show.
It's absolutely insane. And there was this woman that posted on there this morning, because occasionally I get email notifications about, she calls herself like some kind of neighborhood crime manager, Jennifer something, not me. But she was like posting about these 13 people that got arrested as some kind of, potential criminal warning. It gets very heated politically on Nextdoor, which is how again, we've talked about this before, Seattle thinking it's so woke. These are these like wealthy white people in this neighborhood who put the, we love everybody signs out. Black Lives Matter, but then post, their racist, political conservative bullshit on things like Nextdoor because they feel like it's safe there. So yeah, I think stabby is a generous term for their behavior.
We had an amazing day as an organization on Saturday. We covered 5 protests in 4 cities in 2 states. On Saturday, we had 3 people in the field. Protests, vigils, different, and rallies. I shouldn't just say protests because it was the gamut of the things that we covered. I was not on the ground in Seattle. We only got a couple of minutes to talk to Renee about it. We've seen this pattern before. It started peaceful. Some windows got broken. Huge response from Seattle police. But you know what stood out to me, Jennifer, is some of those video clips we saw were right on the waterfront, right in the same spot where a mentally ill, distraught, suicidal man, literally on the same spot, was shot to death by Seattle Police Department and what Seattle Police is calling a justified shooting. And they couldn't find Seattle Police any less lethal. The only less lethal used was by Port Police, not City of Seattle. Seattle, in their initial press release, right on the blog, kind of tried to position it that they use less lethal. There was a lot of less lethal that they had available for that protest. It was no problem.
Yep. Well, that's because they got to save that less lethal shit so they can, pound the hell out of protesters, because they don't like them and they can't just go off shooting that many people willy-nilly. But, some random person in the throes of a fucking mental health crisis on the waterfront, let's just shoot him up. And what was it? Like, how many seconds was it from the time they arrived?
14 seconds.
Yeah.
14 seconds.
Sorry, I'm swearing again. I'm sorry, everybody. I've had a rough week. So I'm entitled to a few F-bombs. Yeah. But, it's just, they're reserving their stock of less lethal force for, protests.
Spam those hearts if you love Jennifer's F-bombs. Let Jennifer know that you love her F-bombs by spamming those hearts across all the channels. You can put it in the comments, too. She can read your comments. We love your F-bombs, Jennifer. I love the F-bomb button. I don't ever get to push that. The event that I covered and we streamed on Saturday, and there's a discrete stream for that, for the Breonna Taylor Memorial. It was done in Portland. That was peaceful, beautiful, amazing. And there was another incident. I wanted to talk about this show, but Jennifer, as you know, we've discussed about really trying to keep these at 60 or 75 minutes, and I put it in the cutting room floor. Maybe Thursday we'll talk about it, because what happened in Portland really deserves to have the flashlight signed on it and talked about some more. And we will do that at another time. The other thing I will say, it always seems whenever I go to Portland, it's in the big scheme of things pretty chill. In Seattle, it goes nuts. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday. So.
Yeah. Apparently,
And
you're
with that, we'll do another real brief pause for the cause, and we're going to go ahead to the next segment.
Okay.
So for those of you who didn't watch the stream on Saturday, things got a little interesting in Olympia. And we had a, on the air during the stream, conversation with the Proud Boys. And I wouldn't say that it started as a conversation, but it certainly ended at a conversation. I'll have more to add actually to this. It's about maybe 10 minutes of total time. Obviously, for the interest of brevity in the show, it's been clipped down for 10 minutes. But also, I will say, because apparently the Proud Boys watch our streams, Jennifer, I will say that I think this is going to be showed in a fair and accurate light. And I'm going to kind of show the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we always strive to do in that. And so with that, I'm going to roll the clip. There's some F-bombs. And with that, here we go.
Go fuck your shit.
And thank you so much.
Boys, fuck you, motherfucker.
I'm Malcontent.
Hi.
Howdy.
We're watching you.
Don't
All right.
dox nobody today, okay? But people use
Did
stuff.
we not just have a good conversation? Were you getting an elbow?
Yeah, I heard. I was just saying. You're not a communist. That hopefully.
No, I would not identify myself as a communist.
All right. All right. I just want to make sure that you're aware that people do use your footage to try to dox people, and I've already had to tell 3 other people today that have been on your footage to be like, hey, people are being doxed, and they do use yours. So I just want to make sure that you don't advocate for doxing or violence.
I don't advocate for doxing. I was doxed.
Okay. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure because
I was doxed, very high profile dox. So I don't advocate it. And I have actually, if you're looking, you'll flip through. You'll see where I've gone and said, left or right, doxing's wrong. I think they use they. Yeah. And I'll tell, right. And I'm live. My followers have heard me say this. They use wedge issues like abortion, like guns, like single payer health care to keep us divided.
Yep.
If we sat down
and race,
and I won't disagree with that. I won't disagree with that. If we sat down and had beers and we talked about the symptoms of the disease, we would probably agree with an 80%, including you and me. If we sat down and then we tried to define the disease, so in other words, here are the symptoms, we think the disease is this, we'd probably get to 60 to 70%.
Yeah, pretty close.
Where it all falls apart, how do you cure the disease? But if we kept having a civil conversation, we'd probably get to 50%. And then the 50% that's left over, we would probably go, you know what? 30% of it is those guys playing that 30% to keep us pissed off.
Yeah.
And then it's the 20%. And I get it. Some of that stuff in the 20%, you and I are never going to agree. Ever, ever, ever. Totally get it. But some of that 20% we will.
I chalk it up to skulls to kind of like, remember the gladiatorium with Roman? Like
Yeah.
Tara?
Yeah.
The people would rise up unless they had bloodshed to see.
Yeah.
That's what the media and the career politicians do. So that's where at least you and I can see on that. So I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having a civil conversation, right?
Dr. Churchill.
All right, we good?
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
So there you go. And again, the whole conversation is about 10 minutes. You can see it, it's live, it's all out there. And I think, again, this has been shown in the interest of the brevity for the show in the reality that was there. Now, Jennifer, I'll make really clear, I don't believe for 1 second I'm going to be barbecuing with these guys next week or ever, and vice versa. But I do think that there was positive dialogue. And we talked about some of the issues. Like one of the things we were asked, and the only reason I didn't include that is the audio was, for some reason, I don't know why, the audio for this one guy that was talking to me initially on the air was so soft, and it was very, very hard to hear what he was saying. He asked me, how to identify politically, which of course is a loaded question, but people who watch the show know I'm not Democrat, I'm not Republican. I said, I'm independent. He goes, well, what does that mean? And I said, there's some issues I'm very right. I said, there's a couple of issues I'm pretty right on. There's some issues I'm really far left on, and there's some other stuff in the middle. And anybody who's watched the show or been following this for any period of time knows that. So then I was asked, what am I right on? I go, guns. Guns and interpretation of the Constitution. I love all 27 amendments, and I believe in a pretty strict view in the interpretation. I'm paraphrasing what was said, but again, people that watch, this wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. They asked me, what was on left, and the first thing I said, single-payer healthcare, women's right to choose, right? These are leftist views. The one thing I will say this, got asked the question, am I a communist? And so I've talked about this a lot too, and Jennifer, you and I have talked about this. Marxism, communism, and socialism get just rolled up into the same little ball. They're not even remotely the same things.
No, they're not. It's just interesting to me how adherence to the articles, and the amendments of the Constitution has somehow become a politically right thing. I don't think that's necessarily something that's politically a right wing or conservative thing, this adherence to the Constitution. I think people understand that the Constitution is the founding governing document of the nation. And I can appreciate the ways in which it was drafted, coming from the Articles of Confederation after, the end of the Revolutionary War and the United States finally gets independence, and the need for the drafting of this Constitution. And then there's been amendments over times, but I think when the Constitution becomes this conservative or, very much right issue is when there's no understanding that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, and which is why we have the power to amend it. And also a lack of understanding about the ways in which amendments work, and this fear that just like that, gun rights are going to be taken away, that civil liberties are going to be taken away, not understanding what the First Amendment is and trying to use it, the First and 14th Amendments as arguments to justify not following public health mandates. These are the things that get me, and I think it's the interpretation of the Constitution that make it become more of a conservative issue.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And, and particularly on the guns, I've said this many times, right? I'm still waiting for Bill Clinton to come for my guns, right?
Yes.
And Obama was coming for my guns. And it's nobody's coming for the guns. Come on.
It doesn't happen that way. It's not going to happen
right,
that way.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter how many guns that you have, because if they really wanted your guns, you're already outgunned. They have tanks. Absolutely. They have tanks and airplanes and helicopters. And they're already listening to all the communications and stuff. It's already game over.
Yeah.
So,
and what is when they take things like the massacre at Wounded Knee as a way in which to draw parallels about this is what happens when the government takes your guns. When that isn't what happened at all, really. So when they kind of appropriate those particular historical events and then, use it to fearmonger about guns being taken away. And that just goes back again to this misunderstanding of how the Constitution works, an interpretation of it, and how amendments of the Constitution work.
Yeah, Dora asked the question, when somebody comes, one of our in the comments, when somebody comes, if they've got weapons, does it make me more nervous than somebody who's unarmed or whatever? It all depends on the level of discipline they're showing. Everybody in that group was showing a ton of weapons discipline who was visibly armed. I'm not going to be nervous about that. The person that makes me nervous is a person that doesn't show any weapons discipline or is not following. Look, I went through NRA gun training. I used to be an NRA member back in the early 90s. And then the NRA went totally off the rails after the Brady Bill. And they really moved from being like a gun safety organization, a gun education. I'm like, out. I'm out. No, out. You guys are not what you were anymore. And I went through all the NRA training. Classic NRA gun training is you do not pull out a gun unless you intend to use it. You do not point a gun at a person unless you intend to shoot that person. You do not shoot a person unless you intend to kill the person. Those three rules were created to make a rational person really think about pulling the gun out in the first place. And if you have somebody who is disciplined in that respect, and you can tell, I've been out in the field enough to be able to see who's disciplined and who's not. And when you see someone who's not disciplined and armed, yeah, that's like, oh man. But generally, if somebody is displaying weapons discipline, I'm not a fan of open carry, despite the fact that I like 2A, because I think it creates problems. I think we've seen this. If people start shooting at each other and the police arrive, the police don't know who's the good guy with the gun and the bad guy they don't know. And it just makes it harder for law enforcement when people try to be the hero. And we could rat hole in that conversation all night long. And I'm just going to end it there. But if people are open carrying and they're showing discipline, it's like when we saw, Jennifer, like when we saw some stuff in Michigan, right? And we saw these guys who are open carrying and they're like holding and they got no trigger discipline. Those are the people that scare me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. There's a big difference between responsible gun owners and people that have them, and care for them irresponsibly and don't go through the training and things like that. So
the one thing I will close on is this. I've spoken about doxing. I've been doxed. I'm anti-doxing, whether you're left or you're right. And, what they expressed was concern that people use my video and content for dox. And I've heard this from both sides. At the end of the day, I can't control how somebody's going to use my content after it's been shot. And I would say that to both sides. Now, I will say this to both sides. If you're doxing people and you're using my content to dox people, you're a human piece of shit. Both sides. Period. End of story. When you dox people, you might think, ooh, but you're putting family in. You don't know the consequences until you've gone through it. And you're putting, their immediate family in danger, extended family in danger, because they may not just go after that individual. They may go after their mother or father in another state, or brothers and sisters, or next door neighbors, or friends. That's how far out it goes. And I will say this to the Proud Boys who brought this to my attention. I wish one of you would come forward and say Andy No needs to stop, because Andy No has built an entire career on doxing people. That's my challenge to you. So, and Jennifer, I'll close with this. If we could all just sit down and talk, I think we would just be in such a better place as a country, but we're not even willing to talk.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
So, I don't think that we're going to be holding hands and singing Kumbaya. But I think people get a better understanding and the temperature comes down. People want to be heard. They wanted to be heard.
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to be heard. Both sides listened and ended good. And here's the punchline to all of this. They actually walked by me a second time when I was off camera, and we talked again for about another minute. Smaller group of them. But we talked again for another minute. There were no issues. I didn't feel it was all good. And again, I hold no delusions that I'm going to, we're going to have a barbecue next week. No, absolutely not. But, I get it. All right, with that, Jennifer, we're going to go ahead and move to the next story. And the polls getting ready to close. You got a couple of more minutes to go ahead and get your votes in. Jennifer, you've got an amazing piece of history for us tonight. And with that, I'm familiar with this story. I don't know how many other people are, though.
So this ties in with what we're going to talk about a little bit Thursday, which is the 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee, which is actually ongoing at this particular moment in time. So on March 27th, 1973, an Apache woman and actress named Sasheen Littlefeather stepped onto the Oscar stage to politely decline Marlon Brando's Oscar award for The Godfather and declare Brando's unhappiness for the treatment of Native peoples in film, television, and at a broader level. They actually connected through director Francis Ford Coppola. Littlefeather actually wrote Brando a letter about his interest in Native American issues and support of Native peoples across the country. He was an avid supporter of fishing rights. He also, along with Jane Fonda, supported the occupation of Fort Lawton and also Wounded Knee. So some cheered Littlefeather, as you'll see in the video, while others booed the Apache woman. She's actually dressed in Apache ceremonial regalia. And again, it's important to note that this is taking place at a very pivotal time during Native activism in the midst of the occupation of Wounded Knee. And so if I know you have some video, David, if you want to roll that.
Yeah, before I play the clip, just a little bit of advisement to if you're watching us on Facebook. I got a little bit concerned we might get knocked off the air for playing this clip. If we're knocked off the air, you could go over to YouTube, or the easiest one to remember is malcontentnews.tv. You don't even need a Twitch account or even a Twitch app loaded on your phone. You can just go to the browser, malcontentnews.tv. It'll drop you right to our page. And Jennifer, with that little fingers crossed, here's the clip.
I learned a great deal from a director named Ingmar Bergman. Often to be most eloquent is to be silent.
You're quite right. The film we've just seen has said it all. I think we should say that those nominated for the best performance by an actor are
Marlon Brando in The Godfather,
Michael Caine in Sleuth,
Laurence Olivier in Sleuth,
Peter O'Toole in The Ruling Class,
Paul Winfield in Sounder. The winner is Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
Accepting the award for Marlon Brando and The Godfather, Miss Sasheen Littlefeather.
Hello, my name is Sasheen Littlefeather. I'm Apache, and I'm president of the National Native American Affirmative Image Committee. I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening, and he has asked me to tell you in a very long speech, which I cannot share with you presently because of time, but I will be glad to share with the press afterwards, that he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, and on television in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee. I beg at this time that I have not intruded upon this evening, and that we will, in the future, our hearts and our understandings will meet with love and generosity. Thank you on behalf of Marlon Brando.
Jennifer, I'll let you unpack.
Yeah, no, so this is like, this was an extremely brave thing that she did. There was a lot of animosity as a result of Wounded Knee, and people were pretty divided about how to feel. So the late 60s and early 70s was a really big turning point for Native activism in the United States and the rise of the American Indian movement. We had, of course, things like the Trail of Broken Treaties, the occupation of the BIA building in Washington, D.C. We had the fish wars. We had all of these very different things. And, you know, people were really beginning to push the government to recognize and enforce treaties as they were written and negotiated in the 19th century. The last actual treaty was the one with Nez Perce in the 1860s, and then the final reservation, one of the final reservations that was made through executive order by Ulysses S. Grant, and that was the Colville Indian Reservation on the other side of the mountains near Omak in Washington. So this was a very pivotal moment. This is an extremely brave thing that she did. As you could see, there were mixed reactions to how things went down, but it was very significant at this particular moment in time to have somebody speak out as significant and well known and respected as Marlon Brando and Jane Fonda and others who actually came and participated in some of these protests. Marlon Brando came up here and was actually part of some of the fishing protests. So yeah, this was an extremely pivotal moment. I thought she deserved to be recognized for it. Obviously, as we can see, she got mixed reactions. She continued on to engage in activism and be an actress. But yeah, this is a big moment in some bigger moments in the activism, Native people that made really meaningful changes in the 1970s and the 80s, and that continue into the present day.
Yeah, somebody in the comments said that Raquel Welch got on stage after that. I don't know if Raquel Welch was accepting an award or giving an award, and called her Pocahontas.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's actually a great documentary I'm going to recommend called Real Indians, REEL Indians, and it's about this longer history of portrayal of Native peoples, and it's done by a Native person. It's a wonderful documentary. It's been on Netflix. I'm not sure if it still is, but if you can find it, it's definitely worth a watch. It's funny. It's got a lot of history about the ways in which Native people were treated in the film industry.
Mods and admins, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll. The poll is closed, and if you could let Jennifer and I know as we talk for a couple of more minutes about this story, on what the winning story is, Jennifer and I will keep an eye on the comments to see what story we are unpacking. Jennifer, one of the things that jumps out in my head is how the motion picture industry really hasn't come that far in their portrayal or selection of Native American artists. The most modern example that comes to mind is the reboot of The Lone Ranger and casting Johnny Depp as a Native American in that role, and Johnny Depp's horrific portrayal of Native American culture in that role.
Yeah. There was an awful movie Adam Sandler did too that was on Netflix for a little while that had some really negative stereotypes, and I can't remember the name of it because I could never bring myself to watch it. But it's not just the ways in which white people are cast as Native people, but the ongoing depictions of Native people in film by non-Native directors and producers as these like archaic, vanished, unable to keep with modernity kind of figures, and they're just relegated to a distant past. And you saw this, there was a movie I can't think of right now, but it was about a Native, like a marshal escorting, it was like an Academy Award nominated film, a marshal escorting some Native people back to the West after a murder. And so it's like at the end, the whole family dies and the white man and woman take off with the Native child. And it's still these very problematic, upholding of these problematic stereotypes in film that go beyond just the casting of Native, white people as Native peoples.
Yeah, another show that comes to mind that I have mixed feelings about is Deadwood. Deadwood I have mixed feelings about. And again, this one I'm real careful because I'm in your lane. But that is an area and period of real fascination to me. Yeah. And there are some things historically Deadwood got right. There's some things historically Deadwood got really wrong. And there's other things in the HBO show Deadwood that they had to introduce because if they didn't introduce some of that stuff, no one would watch the show. So there's some Hollywood eyes of it. But there's one scene that sticks out in my mind with portrayal of Native American. And again, it's not like Johnny Depp-ic, but it's still, it's like it's accurate in how it's portrayed, but how it's portrayed is ick, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the movie I was just talking about is called The Hostiles. It's from 2017. It's about an army captain escorting a dying Cheyenne war chief. Yeah, because they're all war chiefs. Back to his homeland. And yeah, it just becomes, it's very extremely historically problematic, perpetuates numerous problematic stereotypes, especially about the vanishing and subjugation of Native peoples. So yeah, this is, still very much an ongoing issue about portrayal, unless you're watching films that are written and produced by Native peoples. I mean, if thinking back, like Smoke Signals, is a good representation, although Showman Alexi is kind of problematic now. But there's a lot of good films being written and produced and directed by Native peoples that are kind of pushing back against these problematic stereotyping Hollywood characters or Hollywood representations of Native people.
So I'm seeing in the comments, but I need confirmation. Jennifer, it looks like we have a tie. It looks like, if I'm reading the things that are going by, that the Louisiana police officers and the situation there and the Bundy, it appears those two are the tie. But can somebody let me know in the comments if I've got that right? And we're just going to kind of I think we'll do a little pause for the cause while we're waiting for the comments, because I think that'll be a good thing and we'll have that answered.
Okay.
Oh my God. I love how this appeared in the comments. I was wrong. I misread the Bundys. There's just a conversation going on about the Bundys. It is State of Louisiana Troopers, Jennifer. That is the story that has bubbled up to the top. So, and I'm glad, actually, because I have a fair number of thoughts on this. And I saw that New Orleans Blackbird, who's been talking in the comments, at least is portraying that I would say by NOLA, I would presume they're from New Orleans, and I know they've been commenting and providing some other things. Louisiana's reputation for their treatment of the Black community in particular is, I mean, it's like Alabama and Mississippi might be the only states that are worse, and that's not saying a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Looking back to Hurricane Katrina, but looking back at, Louisiana, New Orleans, longer history with Black peoples. I mean, that's where the central slave markets were, during the domestic slave trade. New Orleans slave markets were rich, wealthy planters and their wives went to show off and buy people like they were livestock. So, these legacies, we could talk about the abolition of slavery. We can talk about civil rights all we want, but these legacies, they're ingrained in these spaces and they live on. It's not just, the way in which people are raised. These legacies are alive still in these, geographic spaces. And historians talk a lot about spatial history, but these things resonate there and they continue on, in the lived experience and the way things are constructed and the way things are memorialized and, people having these kinds of things as monuments. I mean, look at the South more broadly and like plantation tours and people dressed up, to like reenact what it was like to live on a plantation and things like that. So these things are still very much alive and well, and these legacies live on and play out in, these modern day incidences of excessive force and mistreatment of Black people in various ways.
Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent and I went to New Orleans. We did a plantation tour while we were there, and nobody dressed in costume or any period actors like that. Yeah. I can't remember the name of the plantation we went to. It's outside of it's one of the more famous ones. Yeah. It's a famous one, but it wouldn't be like if there's one that's like a tourist trap, we wouldn't go to the tourist trap one. We avoid stuff like that. And they, in the narrative of what was going on, Jennifer, really portrayed that, hey, life as a slave wasn't all that bad. Yeah. They got to grow all their food. They, Sunday wasn't a work day because that was a day when the master, I'm just using the word they used, right, would come and teach them out of the Bible. And then they could, and if they could make crafts and sell it, they could potentially buy themselves out of slavery. And Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent, very interested in history, not raised in this country. Me, I'm just like biting my lip to the point that blood's about ready to come down because I'm like, no.
That's not how that worked. So if we're looking for a good book about the lived experience of the enslaved, Sadia Hartman, she's an African-American scholar. She wrote a book called Scenes of Subjection. And she not only details the ways in which slaves kind of dealt with being enslaved and what that was like, and the ways in which they both resisted and found ways to survive and thrive in those really bad conditions, but also the ways in which they were enslaved even after the Emancipation Proclamation, what was considered their being granted their freedom. So it's called Scenes of Subjection. It's a fantastic work. So if you guys are interested in reading more about that, check it out.
So back to the story with these Louisiana State Troopers, I can unpack a little bit more because I actually did a fair amount of research for this particular story. I'm starting to kind of figure out, Jennifer, where our audience and the ones it's like, I need to be really ready to talk about this story and that story, and the other ones, I can wing it. Yeah. So went to pull over the gentleman that we saw who broke down crying at the end of that. That was actually a separate clip from that news story, but I pulled them together. He got involved in a high-speed chase, ran from the police, ran over spike strips. Yeah. When he ran over spike strips, he got out of the vehicle, laid on the ground, arms out, full compliance. The 3 officers in question turned off their body cameras and beat the living shit out of him, then falsified all of the records, say that he resisted arrest, did not put in any explanation on why the body cameras were turned off, and then, to make matters worse, Jennifer, bragged about it in text messages and social media, that they put the fear into him and he's going to feel, he's going to feel the hurt forever from that one, and bragging about what they did. And I think one of the things that the story brings out is 2 of the officers involved in that are in 3 or 4 additional investigations going back to 2018 for this exact same actions. And all but 2 of them, because there's 6 total, all but 2 are still on the payroll. 1 killed himself. Nice, brave way to deal with that. And whenever we talk about suicide, I always say this. If you are feeling suicidal, if you are feeling it's not the end. Whatever you're feeling right now, it's temporary. It will get better. Mods or admins, could someone please drop the telephone number for the suicide hotline into the chat, please? The second officer, Jennifer, one of the officers in question resigned today. That was an update to the story. It sounds like it was kind of a resigned fired. Basically it was kind of, if you don't resign, we're going to fire you. And if you fire you, you'll have a black mark on your police record and you won't be a police officer. But if you resign, because this is how police unions get to operate, you can go be a cop somewhere else and beat up suspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're just not seeing any repercussions for this kind of behavior. And it's because the system was put in place, like you've said before, to function the way it's functioning perfectly. It's there to uphold white supremacy, and that's what it does. That's its function. That's what it's doing. That's why people receive minimal repercussions when they consistently do things like this, except for, the outliers. You've talked about the one cop that was prosecuted in Texas. But that is so few and far between. They're anomalous. This behavior is not punished. It is not punished in a way that is commensurable with the crime because it lingers on from, these white men being in positions of authority and then being used to being in these positions of authority, that being built into the system that governs the nation, and then continually perpetuated without consequence for negative actions.
And this ties back to what I said earlier about my views of the Constitution. Because I know there's people, I don't know if they're seeing in the comments, because the mods and admins, we don't see the bad comments, right? Yeah. So they do a great job of keeping things pretty clean for us over here. But I'm sure there's some people that are listening to us right now, Jennifer, that are thinking, well, he ran from the police. He got what he deserved. You know, there's this document called the Constitution. And in the Constitution, there's this thing called the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights assures a suspect of due process. And part of due process is an assumption of innocence until proven guilty. And police officers are not judge, jury, and in some cases, literal executioner on the side of the road. The founding fathers put that in there because they were dealing with British troops, and this was top of mind with them. And British troops operated as judge, jury, and executioners on civilians without trial, without due cause. And they wanted to make sure that never happened on our soil again, full stop, if you're a rich white man landowner.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. If you're a rich white male landowner, if you're Black, if you're Native, those things don't apply to you. And so when you have particular people that have a kind of limited understanding of history and at least know that much and are, you know, interpreting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in very particular ways, the founding fathers didn't mean for it to apply to people of color. They didn't mean for it to apply to, you know, Black people, for, you know, Native people. It was meant to protect people like me, you know, people in positions of authority, white males, you know, like that's how they envision that. And so in their minds, they're justified because the system is meant to work that way. It's meant to, you know, keep them in power. It's meant to protect them, you know, and so when that's consistently reinforced through a lack of punishment, they're going to continue to do this.
And let's go back to Clark County, Washington, and Judge Darvin Zimmerman, who ironically, Jennifer,
David,
almost
sorry,
connects.
it's my daughter. Can I please take this? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So with that said, what I was saying is we've connected everything all together tonight. And actually, Malcontents, it's you that picked this story to discuss. But if you actually go ahead and connect the dots, this connects back to the very things that the Proud Boys and I talked about, to the Judge Zimmerman story in Clark County, Washington, and this story that's happening in New Orleans, and the police activity that we saw happen in Seattle. This is all interconnected in a system that isn't fair, that isn't equitable. And it's not right, because the system should be fair and equitable for everyone. And I don't think that is a unreasonable ask, an unreasonable expectation. All good?
Yes, I'm good. Everything's good.
And we're wrapping up. We're coming to the finish line anyway. So I'm just looking at a real quick thing here on the comments. I don't block people for that. I'm not sure what that was about. Oh, Courtney's here. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Courtney.
We love Courtney. We love all our malcontents. All right, Jennifer, one thing I'm going to do. We have 1008.
Woo!
We have 1008 on TikTok.
That's fantastic.
I just hit the wrong.
Instagram.
Not Instagram. We have an Instagram, but boy, I'll tell you, our Instagram is ignored. There you go. If you want to follow us on TikTok, Malcontent News over on TikTok. If you're just curious on our content, because I know a lot of people are like, I don't want the TikTok app. It's real sketch, yada, yada. You actually just go in a browser and you could just do, you don't have to load the app. If you want to do, you go incognito browser and they can't see what you're doing. So, Jen, Thea Kimball is saying you look marvelous tonight.
What's that?
Thea Kimball in our comments is saying you look wonderful tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. On the White Side Guy, we have 1,008 followers on TikTok as of tonight. I think a week ago we had 100. So if you didn't catch the beginning part of the show, we had a video that's gone viral. We're just getting a lot of lift off of that. Jennifer, I will say the video that we did today has landed with a complete thud. So
TikTok's weird.
Complete and total thud.
Yeah.
So Try again tomorrow. It is a tough puzzle to unpack, that is for sure. Malcontents, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please consider being a patron if you're new to this show. For as little as $5 a month, you can help keep the lights on, literally, and provide the opportunity for the entire team of almost 20 people that are behind Jennifer and I. And then I say Renee is also a visible face from time to time. But there's a team of about 20 people that are behind us that you don't see that work very, very hard to kind of make all of this possible. And as little as $5 a month, you can keep the lights on. If you can't do $5 a month, you can do Venmo. And I always say this, $5 on Venmo, that actually goes a long way. That, for instance, $5 in Venmo helps pay for our Adobe Spark account for the month. And we build a lot of graphics on Adobe Spark. There's one example of what $5 can do. So with that, thank you, everybody. Jennifer, have a good night.
You as well. Good night, everyone.
Malcontents, everybody, have a good night. And we will see you Thursday.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
He said malcontent Antifa. Fuck you.
You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.